Very good. Thank you.
All right. Welcome everybody to our webinar, SAP Business One Pricing Overview 2023. Today we'll be talking about the entire Business One pricing strategy. So we'll talk about ERP logic and also about the Business One. We'll mention about the determining the cost of the implementation and pricing, how to minimize the cost. At the last, we'll have Q&A session. Okay. About ERP logic, we started in 1998. We have done various SAP solutions, including the small, mid-size, and large enterprise companies. We have done various implementation. We have offices in US headquarters, and we have office in Canada, Europe. Within Europe, we have office in Netherlands, Italy, UK, France, and even in Australia. And we have a big team in India. So we have the global presence. And probably some of you already know, we have hosted several webinars in various topics. We have done quite a few webinars, and some of them which we are planning for this quarter. And today we'll be talking mainly about Business One pricing. At this point, I will introduce Mr. Jerry. He will be mainly talking about the Business One pricing. Jerry, okay. Over to you.
Great, thanks, Jeg. I appreciate that. Again, thanks everybody for joining today. I've been doing SAP Business One since 2005, so we've been around the block a few times, and this is a question that typically comes up. Is, people want to know what the price of SAP Business One is, and it's a hard thing to just answer and quantify with simple responses. But we're going to do our best today to try to give you a general idea of what an implementation might cost. To start with, we're going to just cover SAP Business One in general. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because that's really not the topic of today's discussion. But SAP Business One is designed for small, mid-sized companies. Designed to seamlessly integrate your entire business. It's easy to set up, easy to use. There's over 95,000 customers that are now using SAP Business One. Over 300 partner solutions out there, partners with 500 solutions to expand the capability of Business One to do things beyond what it does out of the box. There's mobile apps to help you get access to it at any time. And then, of course, it can be deployed in the cloud or on premise. Again, without getting into all the detail here, this is what you get with an SAP Business One license. Again, at a high level, management, administration, the accounting and financials, purchasing and operations, sales and service, inventory distribution, production and MRP, the project and resource management, and of course, then there's customization tools that are built within there to help us configure the software to fit your business. Additionally, across the top, you've got the web client accessibility, mobile applications, the analytics and dashboards, and of course, it can handle multi-languages and many different localizations and multi-currencies. Beyond the capability that you get with Business One out of the box, we also have the ability to expand its capability into to make it specific for different industries, discrete and process manufacturing or job shop manufacturing, warehouse distribution, retail, and field service. Again, just to give you a few examples of that. And again, there's many different industries that this software is used in. But as I mentioned, this is really not the focus of today's discussion. But if you do want to learn more about SAP Business One, you can go to our website, or down here is a link to our YouTube channel where you can see many videos and past webinars and things like that that we've done on SAP Business One. And there's lots of information out there available to learn about what Business One does and its capabilities. So with that, I'm going to jump into the real topic of today's discussion, and that's the cost of Business One. So I'm going to turn off my camera and let's start focusing on the slides as opposed to me. So I'm going to move forward here. So what determines the cost of an SAP Business One implementation? There's really three major factors: the software licenses themselves, the method that you deploy the software, and the services that go into that deployment. And so we're going to touch on each one of these today in this conversation, excuse me, to help give a better idea of what that would cost. So to start with the subscription or the software, you really have two options with software. SAP Business One can be sold in a subscription model where you basically pay a per user per month fee, and that's going to be a recurring fee that you pay annually every year basically. So it's a recurring fee. You're really not buying the software; you're just basically renting it. The other option is to purchase the software, and so that becomes a one-time purchase then for whatever software licenses you want. And then there's annual maintenance that goes with that. And the question is, okay, well, what does annual maintenance give you? And we strongly recommend that you stay current with your annual maintenance, because what that provides you then is access to any software updates from SAP, any bug fixes that might be out there, the ability to upgrade the software as new releases and new functionality is deployed, and it gives you support from SAP. So we strongly recommend that you stay current with your annual maintenance. And if you purchase the software, as I mentioned, that's billed separately as an annual maintenance fee every year. Where in the subscription model, it's included automatically. So maintenance is automatically baked into the subscription pricing, so you don't have to pay for that separately, but it's in there. So that's kind of the two options for software. When you look at the deployment method, again, there's really two options. It can be a hosted solution, or it can be on-premise using your hardware. In the hosted model, there's really, again, a couple of different options. There's a single tenant option to where you're basically in your own environment. There's a lot of control and a lot of flexibility with that. Or there's a multi-tenant environment where then you're in an environment with other of our customers. And so it's a shared environment. And so there's some pros and cons to that, and we'll talk through that in just a minute. The on-premise option basically means that you're going to buy the hardware, you're going to support the hardware, and we're basically just going to use the hardware to install your software and then for you to use that. But all the costs associated with on-premise, anything as far as the hardware, the networking, everything that goes into that hardware, and the support of that hardware is going to be outside of a service that we would provide to you. That's something that you'd get for yourself. And of course, we have all kinds of specifications and manuals and things that we can help you with buying the right hardware. So, but primarily today, we're going to talk about the hosted solution, because we know what the cost of this is. We really don't know what the cost of that is, because that's going to be up to the cost of your providers. The services, again, we have the initial setup and go live, and that's really the implementation project itself. So we have a whole methodology that we go through to help get you going, to get your data loaded into the system, all that kind of stuff. And then once we've gone live, then there's ongoing support. And the ongoing support, again, is very difficult to quantify, because some customers are very self-sufficient and there's very little ongoing support. Other customers rely on us a lot to do things, and so there's a fair amount more ongoing support. But every customer is different, so it's a hard thing to quantify. But these are the three main elements, and we're going to talk about each one of these in a little bit more detail. So to talk about the software licenses, again, we're talking about SAP Business One specifically. There's really 4 different license types that are available. There's a professional, and the professional license basically gives you access to everything in the system. So your super user will be a professional license, and many other users in the company would be as well, but they would be people who perform cross-functional roles and who need access to everything that the system has to offer. And so a professional license is kind of an unrestricted license, but keep in mind, that this first bullet down here, that all licenses can be further controlled with authorizations and permissions. So no matter what type of license you have, there are still a great deal of authorizations and permissions that can be set to limit what people can do within that license type. And then there's three types of limited license: a limited CRM, a limited logistics, or a limited financials. Now, again, the idea is if you can use a limited license, it can save a lot of money. The limited licenses are roughly 50% the price of a professional license. So if your users can use limited licenses, it's going to save you some money. So a limited CRM license, again, at a high level, mainly used by salespeople, by people who are doing customer support, or people who are doing services. The limited logistics is people, in the operations, shipping, receiving, purchasing, those types of functions. And the limited financial, again, it basically only gives you access to the financial module and mostly for the accounts payable functions. But again, there are applications for that license as well. And so, as I mentioned, beyond what these licenses, the limited licenses first restrict you from doing, then additionally, you can have the authorizations that can further restrict those licenses. But for anybody who's going into an implementation, the detailed analysis of what licenses you need really needs to be done. And so what we've provided here is a link to a chart. So on our website, if you were to go to the ERP Logic LBSI website, what you'd see is a license comparison chart. So this is at a pretty high level, but it starts to break the functions, the modules and the functions of the software down, and shows you what each of the different license types can do. So basically, and this is again a high level chart, and certainly not the level that you'd need to go to ultimately determine this. But this first chart here just kind of gives you a high level view of all of that. But what we really recommend that you'd need to do is to go to this chart, is to click on this box here. And what that's going to do is take you to a very detailed matrix, basically, that shows you all the SAP modules, all of the functionality, and in detail what each license allows you to do. So what we encourage our customers to do is to take each user of the system and identify all of the functions that user would need to perform, and then look to see if there's a limited license that covers everything that user needs to do. And if you can fit them into a limited CRM or a limited logistics or a limited financial license, then again, you're going to be able to save some money by going with a limited license. But if there's things that user needs to do that are outside of what a specific limited license would allow, then that user would have to go to a professional license. And then you could, again, use the permissions and authorizations to restrict what they can do. But the idea is, if you can fit as many users into limited licenses as you can, that's going to save some money in the overall cost of the project. So we strongly recommend that customers take a good look at this license comparison chart and spend the time to go through each user and figure out where they fall and which license they should use. So that's really the beginning of it, is to say, hey, here are the license structures. What type of license does each user need? Now, without getting into a ton of detail, again, there are the fine print around some of the rules for this. So when you're looking at this, any limited license can be upgraded to a professional. So if you start off with a limited CRM and for some reason, you need to go to a professional, you can do that just by paying the difference between what the two license types would cost. Any limited license, you can switch those between different limited licenses with just a nominal fee, just for the 20 minutes it takes for us to make that change. But you cannot downgrade professional licenses to a limited. So once you're at a professional, you're basically you can't downgrade that to a limited. There are some different rules for subscriptions. With subscription licenses, on your anniversary date, you can make changes to your contract. So you can remove licenses, you can move licenses from professional to limited. You can basically restructure what you need from a licensing perspective on your anniversary date only. But you can add licenses at any time. So if you need to increase the amount of licenses, you can do that at any time. But to move licenses around, you can only do it on your anniversary date. And for subscriptions, the annual maintenance is included, as I mentioned. On the purchased only licenses, you basically can't give back licenses. Once you bought them, they're yours. And the annual maintenance is going to be based off the total software that you purchased. So in our case, it's 18% of the total cost of the software is going to be billed on an annual basis. And again, you'd be billed annually for that maintenance. So again, a little detail here, but again, just so you have this for future reference. Now we're moving on to the deployment method. So there's really, again, the hosted methods, which are the first two, and then on-premise. So to talk about the differences here, so in single tenant, This is really required for more complex implementations. So if you're using, several add-ons, if you're doing integrations with this systems, outside of SAP Business One, or if you just want to have control over your own environment, we would recommend the single tenant environment. It's a high performing, secure, very flexible and scalable environment. So if for some reason, if you start adding more users and you need to increase the size of the servers or increase the memory, it's very easy in the single tenant environment for that to happen and to optimize the system for the greatest performance. Now, as you can probably imagine, this is usually the most expensive of the hosted solutions, because you do have the most flexibility, the most scalability, and but this is where most of our customers are going, is into a single tenant environment. But another lower cost option is the multi-tenant environment, and that's going to be used for more basic implementations, smaller implementations. It's still a very high performing environment. It's still very secure, but it's less flexible because it's a multi-tenant environment, meaning that other clients, our customers, are also in that same environment. Now, some people get scared by that, but the reality is your data is very separate from our other customers' data. There's no mixing and matching in there. You're literally just in the same physical location of the server, but that does not mean that the data is intermixed or the databases are intermixed in any way. So it's still a very secure environment, but because we're sharing it with other customers, it's typically less expensive. But that also means it's also less flexible. So upgrades, for example, are done on a predetermined schedule, and when that environment is upgraded, so will your database. And the nice part about that is that then you don't have to pay for those upgrades. They're automatically included, and they're just going to be on a predetermined schedule. So the multi-tenant environment is a little less flexible, a little less expensive, but for smaller basic implementations, it's a very good option. And then third is the on-premise. And again, we really can't talk about the costs of the on-premise, because it's going to be different for everybody. But the idea is, in this case, you would provide your own hardware, your own environment. The entire environment would have to be in there. So if you're using the SAP SQL, you would have to have your own SQL licenses. If you're in HANA, you'd have to have your own HANA server. All the hardware specifications can be provided to you, but all of that becomes your responsibility. And the services required to maintain that, to do your backups, to do all of that stuff would be your cost outside of anything that we're doing, which again is kind of a nice thing about the hosted environment, is that now we're taking care of all of that maintenance. We're taking care of your backups. All of the day-to-day activities are being taken care of as part of the hosted environment. So these are really the three deployment options that are available to you in the Business One world. The third area is services. And again, the services are going to also vary depending on customers. It depends on how much of the SAP solution you implement. If you're going with add-ons, I mean, there's many factors that can impact the cost of the implementation. But when we talk about implementation, that's really going through our proven methodology, the SAP Business One methodology for how we implement. That's all the requirements development, all the installation, data migration, system prototyping, end user training. It's the full, from zero to go live kind of a methodology. Then we go through the go live process to get you up and running on Business One, and then beyond that, then you go into the ongoing support. And the ongoing support, again, is different for every customer. Some customers become very self-sufficient very quickly. They don't require a lot of support after go live. Other customers, they like to continue to enhance the system, maybe asking for additional functionality or additional scope. Whatever the case might be, we're here to support you with any ongoing support needs beyond the implementation and go live. But essentially, those are the three factors that are going to control the cost of the implementation. So now we're going to get into some very specifics. So what are the actual prices associated with this stuff? So if we talk about software, the first option was for purchase software. So if you buy a professional license, the list price is going to be $3,213 for a professional license, and for a limited license, it's $1,666. So again, roughly about 50% of the price of a professional. So the more people you can put into limited licenses, the better. And then the annual maintenance is going to be 18% of all the software that you purchase. So, so again, you can do the math. If you're buying 5 professional and 5 limited, calculate that out, and the maintenance is going to be 18% of that. Now we do have volume discounts that apply into that. So again, it's not a straight forward calculation, but if you are buying in volume, then there are discounts that apply to this, and the maintenance is based off the discounted number, not the list price. So the purchase software basically looks like this. Now, if you go to a subscription model, again, the professional license is $12.96 annually per user. So again, for every user that has a professional license, you're going to pay $12.96 annually. The limited license is $6.72 annually. So, and annual maintenance is included in this pricing already, so there's not a separate fee for annual maintenance. And likewise, volume discounts might apply. So depending on the volumes, there's different tiers of discounts, both on purchase and subscription. So it just depends on the volume that you're getting. And lastly, the add-on software, and we're not even going to cover that topic today because that's very specific to every customer. Some customers have no add-ons, and other customers do have add-ons. But again, that would be a very complicated topic to try to cover in a webinar like this. So these are basically the pricing for the two different software options. So when we get into the deployment method, again, we have the single tenant hosting, and there's really two different fees with the single tenant hosting. There's some flat fees, and that's going to cover things like the integration servers for integrating to other systems, or for the maintenance of those servers. So there's some services associated with that. So those flat fees really don't have anything to do with how many users you have. It's just to have the infrastructure and to support the infrastructure. And then there's per user fees. So the per user fees come out to $588 per month, annually per user. And so for every user that's going to be accessing the system, so for every user that has an SAP license, it would be $588 per user. And again, there's volume discounts that apply. So and I should also say not just volume discounts, but there's also term discounts. So the longer term that you go with, the greater the discounts. So if you go with a 3-year contract, for example, as opposed to a 1-year contract, you're going to get better pricing on a 3-year contract. And the multi-tenant hosting, same sort of thing. So in this case, there's no flat fees because again, it's all part of the pre-existing multi-tenant environment. And so there's only annual per user fees. So $624 per user for the multi-tenant environment. Same thing. The volume discounts apply on quantity as well as term of the contract duration. So that kind of gives you an idea of what the per user and flat fees are for the multi-tenant environment. As I mentioned, the on-premise, that's really not something that we're going to cover today because that's really going to be the cost that for you to go find a vendor to provide the servers and the support of those servers. And the last thing is implementation again, and this is purely just at this point just to give you rough ideas of what implementations cost. But again, a typical implementation, I mean, you're somewhere in the $15,000 minimum is a good idea of where these things start. In the mid-20s is kind of an average implementation. But if we get something more complex, again, it can get up as expensive as $30,000. And this is again for just Business One only. But this again, the maximum would be for customers with many users and some complex things going on. But every customer is different, and we'd have to basically go through our sales cycle, through our discovery process to really determine what the services would be. So those numbers are really just to give you a rough idea. Okay. So moving on, again, what we're trying to do today is to not, give you exact numbers, but to give you an idea of what something would cost. So what we have here is we're going to provide 4 different examples of different sizes of implementations. So here we're looking at a 5-user implementation, and we have 4 different scenarios that we're presenting down here. So the first one is 5 users, purchase software, single tenant hosting. And so if we look at that, we're basically saying to buy the 5 users, you're looking at roughly $12,971 in one-time software purchase amount, and the annual maintenance of $2335, which is roughly, again, the 18% of this number. And then the single tenant hosting for those 5 users is $4692 annually. So essentially, the 1-year cost for a 5-user system in this scenario is roughly about $19,000 in the first year. Now, the same scenario going forward, year two, you're still going to have the annual maintenance, the 2335, and you're still going to have the hosting fees. But this down here, this 12,971, that was a one-time purchase, and you now own the software. So really, these two up here are the only recurring fees. The same thing in this scenario here. The only difference is that now we're doing multi-tenant hosting. And so you can see the software is the same price, the maintenance is the same price, but the hosting fees have come down a little bit for using the multi-tenant hosting. Over here, we have a little bit different scenario because now we're doing 5 users, subscription software, again, in the single tenant hosting. So now instead of buying the software, now we're talking about subscription pricing. So those same users would be licenses would be 5232 annually. And the hosting again is the same number, whether it's whether you're buying the software or subscription, it's the same price, 60 or 4692. The difference now is that all of this would be recurring every year. So this would be your recurring fees, every year that you have the software. And this is the same scenario over here, except now we're in the multi-tenant hosting. So the idea, we're just trying to present some different examples of what it would cost for a 5-user system. And again, we've not included services in here because again, that's going to be different for every customer. But this gives you an idea of what the cost of these solutions would be. Now, what changes the cost of these is then the number of users. So here's another example. And again, I'm not going to go through each of these examples, but I wanted you to have this information available to you so you can do the comparison outside the meeting. But for a 10-user system, again, you see the price of the software has gone up, the price of the maintenance has gone up, and the hosting fees have gone up, based on the number of users that we've had. So, here's the example of what it would be for a 10-user system. And what we're seeing and what we've seen really for the last 2 years is a really big migration to the subscription model in the hosting. So the vast majority of our customers for the last 2 years have been going into one of these two models, going into the subscription software with a single tenant hosting or multi-tenant hosting. But subscription software and hosted has been, without question, the vast majority of where people are going these days. So here's a 5-user, 10-user scenario. We're also providing a 15-user and a 20-user scenario. Again, I'm not going to go through the detail of these, but you can see what the difference is as the pricing increases. As the more users you have, the more software you're buying or the more software you're subscribing to. But the idea is to give you just a rough idea of what this pricing would be. So to move into the final step here of the webinar is to talk about tips to minimize the cost of these projects. So to go through and these are really things that we've just seen from our experience of implementing, is analyzing and selecting the right license types and counts. So, as I went through that user matrix, to really take the time to go through user by user and identifying, what license they need and how many of each license is very important. Again, there's lots of add-ons that are available. You can, our recommendation is to only use the add-ons when it's required for the business. And you can always add them later. So let's just say, for example, that you think you might want to be doing barcode scanning. That's not something you have to do day one. We can do the implementation without that and then add it in later if you want to. And that's just one example of add-ons that we commonly would implement. Selecting longer term subscriptions and hosting agreements. As I mentioned, if you go with a 3-year contract versus a 1-year contract, you're going to get better pricing for a 3-year deal than for a 1-year deal. So again, going with the longer term agreements can really help save some money. Utilizing the volume discounts on software by ordering all the licenses at once. So if you order 5 licenses, but you order them one at a time, you're not going to get the volume discounts that you'd get if you were to order all 5 at once. So certainly, going back to the first bullet, figure out what licenses you need, and then getting them all at once to utilize, to take advantage of the volume discounts is a good way to save money. Focusing on the critical business processes and avoid asking for everything. Again, a key thing here is that when we start these implementations, it's really easy to ask for all the bells and whistles that are available and basically all the features that are available. But keep in mind, the more of those things that you bring into the scope of the project, the longer the project's going to take, the more expensive the services might be. So focusing on the stuff that's critical is really a good way to keep the cost down to start with. Utilizing the available free e-learning. There's lots of learning that's available. SAP provides a whole library of e-learning that goes through all the modules of SAP Business One, and without paying your consultants anything to train on those things, that's all available for free. Likewise, the YouTube channel that I talked about, that we have out there has all kinds of how-to videos on doing, many different things in the system. So there's a great deal of self-education that you can do to help, reduce the cost of an implementation by not having us do the training. Being actively involved in the implementation, this one is just critical. Again, to keep the costs low, if the more active that you guys are in this implementation, the less that you're going to be reliant on us, especially in the ongoing support area. But your users will be more educated and ready for the implementation. Moving quickly. If an implementation drags on for several months, again, it tends to cost more. So longer implementations tend to cost more. So when we commit to these things, if we can move quickly, get the implementation done in 2 or 3 months, those typically are going to be less expensive projects than if they take 5 or 6 months. And choose your SAP partner carefully. The skills that they're bringing to the table, their experiences, and their rates, they can vary greatly from one partner to another. And so, obviously, we believe that we're a good partner for doing this, that we have very competitive rates, but we're also bringing to the table, the skills and experience that can help you get through this process quickly. So, the partner that you use, can have a great impact on what the cost and the quality of your implementation is going to be. So these are kind of our tips on how to minimize those project costs and to keep this thing under control. So again, a very limited topic today for our webinar. We wanted to keep it nice and short. So at this point, we're going to open it up to any questions and answers. Hopefully we'll have the answers. And if you have any things after the meeting, there's Jaga's email address or my email address. Please feel free to contact us. But at this point, I'm going to open it up for any questions that may have come in during the presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry, for going through the presentations and also discussing about the pricing. So as you said, let's see. Looks like there are a couple of questions in the chat. Let me read that out. What is the minimum length of the contract?
Yep. So so obviously that question is only going to apply to subscription software into hosting. And so for subscription pricing, subscription and hosting has a minimum duration of 1 year and a maximum contract of 3 years. And like I said, if you go with the 3-year contract, we can offer better pricing than if you go with the 1-year contract. But if you're not comfortable with 3 years, 1 year is the minimum.
Yeah. And looks like there is another question. Can I buy a 1-user license?
You can.
So yes.
Yep. So a 1-user license again is and strangely enough, we do sell a fair amount of those. And so so if you just want the 1 user, you can do the 1 user. You can install that again in an on-premise situation on your own servers, or you can even put that in a hosted environment if you want. Basically the same rules apply, but yeah, 1 user is certainly acceptable.
Yeah. And looks like there is one more question. Is hosting also called out as cloud hosting?
Yeah, basically that's kind of an interchangeable term, I guess. I mean, it's cloud hosting or hosting. That's really what we're doing is we're hosting in a cloud environment. And so yeah, it's kind of an interchangeable term. But yeah, without question, if you hear cloud hosting, that's really the same as hosting. It's being put into a cloud environment for you.
Yeah. So let's give another minute for any other questions. If any of you have any questions, just post it in the chat. Okay, in interest of time, the recordings will be available in our website soon. And also there is another webinar which we are planning to conduct in December with another topic. Until then, once again, thank you all for joining and have a good one.
Thank you.
Guys.